Lawyers or Reddit, what is the most shocking case you have worked on? Used to work as a legal secretary for a personal injury lawyer. He told me about a case where his client had radiation burns from an X-ray machine. In the avalanche of documents he received from the defendant during discovery, he found an internal memo. The memo described a serious problem with the machines and continued, "This is an issue we can't ignore. Unfortunately, it's not in the budget." When the case went to trial, he told the jury, "Show them they need to put this in the budget next time." The jury complied, handing down one of the largest verdicts California had ever seen. TLDR, lady wanted to show me her vagina, it just happened to not be attached to her body. I already told one shocking story in this thread, but I got another that is a different kind of shocking. I was pretty new to the practice and was meeting with a lot of clients. The firm I worked for had a lot of walk-ins and I was processing the potential clients. I called in the next person and a mid-30s woman walked in carrying a red and white cooler. She pops in down on my desk and spends about 5 minutes trying to sit down in the chair. My first thought was must be some kind of personal injury. First words out of her mouth after she sits, "I need to sue my doctor because my vagina just fell out." My eyes immediately lock onto the cooler. Is that? Yes. I brought in with my just in case you needed to see it. Do you want to see it? She begins to open the cooler. Not gonna lie, I was curious but I stopped her and convinced her that a hospital was her best option at the moment. Turns out she had vaginal reconstruction and the mesh came out in one big blob. Now, this is not my area of expertise. I am a corporate attorney. So I sent her to someone with more experience. Now, this is not my area of expertise. I am a corporate attorney. I told this story on r/lawyers a little while ago, but I'll tell it again here. I'm an immigration lawyer. I do mostly VAWA and asylum, but I handle other stuff on occasion. I had a prospective client come in a few weeks ago. He's interested in pursuing a relatively straightforward application. He tells me that he might have a criminal history that could affect his immigration. It's only one arrest though, he says. It happened in 19XX. And it's not serious. Okay, I say. It happens. Nobody's perfect, and a single arrest is generally not a deal breaker. So, as I'm talking with him, I decide to Google his pretty unique name. A news article comes up, from his country, in his language. It's dated the same year he said. 19XX. I ask him, what kind of crime did you say it was? Oh, he says, I think it was drug related. I figure, alright, marijuana arrest or something, nothing we can't overcome. I click through to the article. The photo on the article sure looks like a lot like the prospective client. Turns out, prospective client's arrest was not for marijuana at all. It was for cocaine. And not a little cocaine. This guy was caught attempting to smuggle 20 pallets of cocaine. I must have looked a little bug-eyed, because the guy gave me a sort of sheepish look and a shrug. I tell the prospective client, maybe we should start by filing a few FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, to see what comes up, and we'll go from there. He agrees, and that's that. I'll double-check my suspicions against the government record, and let the client know what can, or cannot, be done. Suffice it to say, getting caught smuggling multiple pallets of cocaine is not a small-time arrest. But, you never know what is or isn't true, and you should always do your due diligence. Here's another one. Client of mine is an extremely nice guy. He was a green card, permanent residence, applicant, and worked on a fishing boat in Alaska. When he's out on the boats though, fishing for crab or whatever, there's no way for anybody to communicate with him and he's out there for months at a time. Phone calls and letters aren't reaching anybody out in the middle of the Bering Strait. One such a time when he was out there, he apparently got stabbed all the way through the chest with a huge hook thing in a freak accident. Nobody stateside knew, of course. Client was taken, somehow, to the hospital, and survived, but I didn't hear from him for literal months. Well, the USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, happens to issue this guy an interview notice. He's nowhere to be found. The USCIS mark him absent for his interview. I try to reach out to him, but cannot find him. The USCIS then denies this poor guy's case. But, it gets worse, he calls me about a month later. He tells me all about the hook on the ship, but also tells me that after he got home from the hospital, his wife was upset that he didn't earn her any money due to his injury, and then basically beat the hell out of him with a baseball bat, took all of his money and things, and left him for dead. What? So, He's back in the hospital. This guy was like, the single most mild-mannered, nicest guy ever. I ended up putting in huge amounts of unpaid work for months to turn this guy's application around. We switched up his green card application and filed a self-petition through the Violence Against Women Act. That was its own fiasco, but not nearly as interesting a story. We ended up getting his green card approved in what felt like a miracle, and he's now back in Alaska, happily fishing and living his best life. He still calls me once in a while, just to say hello and thank you. Such a nice guy. Immigration work is brutal, exhausting, and soul-sapping. But, sometimes, you do something really good, for somebody who really deserves it. And that makes it all worthwhile. Back in the day I investigated and later in my career prosecuted lots of arsons, so I worked a lot of fire cases. One time the crews roll up on a garage fire. They are met by the home's resident holding a blood-soaked towel to his crotch. The medics get him stable and transported. He later tells us the voice told him to eat a whole box of saltine crackers without drinking any water and he was like okay, and did that. Then the voice told him to eat the newspaper and he was like check. Then the voice said to cut off his testicles with a can opener and he was like yep. Then the voice said set the van on fire in the garage and he was like you got it. He did all those things in that order, and there were the scene photos of the testicles right there on the garage floor. We got him into mental health court and he did pretty well. I was clerking at the time. Little kid fight club. Bunch of moms put their kids in a circle and made them fight each other gladiator style. Real dark stuff. Video included 2 10-year-old girls beating the crap out of each other. Bets were taken but not on all fights. Some were just for entertainment. No fathers involved. What the actual hell? Yeah, at least put pads and helmets on them like they do in Texas. What the fuck, I was in one of those, Southern Texas, BC. My dad put me in at 10, guessing BC I was a bigger than average kid. I didn't know those were illegal, I thought it was like karate class but for broke PPL. Some people don't deserve to be parents. That is horribly sad. A girl in my sister's 9th grade class stabbed another girl in the neck with a steak knife, poor girl bleed out in the hallway at school. The mother gave the knife to her daughter and told her to kill the other girl and to show others not to mess with her. All over a boy. Mom is free, the daughter got 30 years. This is not too far off from what went down in my school. 2 girls fought over the same guy, and one of the girls was a foster kid so she was pretty warped already, and her older sister convinced her to get a needle and syringe, loaded up with chemicals with intent to kill, and then she got 6 other girls to go along with holding the other girl down while she did it. Luckily, one of the other 6 freaked out and reported it to the police. Thank God because they did a locker search and she had it in her locker ready to roll for later that day. There were cases in the UK during the Falklands War in the 80s where the government claimed bullet wounds and lost limbs due to minefields were incidental injuries and not related to the fighting. Like people just randomly generate holes in their chests and limbs fly off during birthday parties etc. The government's own records showed they were Okay, obligatory, not my story. And technically not a case he worked on, but a shocking story about the legal system. So get ready for a tangentially related story. So, my brother is a lawyer. One day he's T-boned at an intersection. Turns out the guy who hit him was FBI. It's apparently procedure when an FBI agent gets in a car accident, their punishment is that they have to work the next FBI car accident's paperwork. So there's my brother talking to this FBI agent working the accident and they hit it off. It comes out that my father and uncle are both former law enforcement, so they start talking about cases they've worked on. The FBI agent tells my brother that he was on scene at the 97 North Hollywood bank shootout, which took place right down the street from where my brother lived at the time. So my brother straight up asks him, those guys, robbers, that were shot, did the ambulances really not get there in time? The FBI guy looks to him and basically tells him, those ambulances and paramedics weren't let anywhere near those guys until they died. I measured and photographed my client's PP and the angle of his dangle to prove the Karen was lying when she said he exposed himself through his front window every day. We won the case using an accident reconstructionist who testified given the height of the window, the client's height, she couldn't have seen it. It was during that testimony that I realized that I had completely misunderstood the expert's instructions on what needed to be measured. I'm not a lawyer, but I served jury duty on a case where a man placed his gun on the cashier table at the Port Authority while trying to pay for his ticket because his hands were full and the gun was in the way of the wallet in his pocket. I was just an articling student at the time, but we got a phone call that still makes me laugh each time I think about it. A woman calls in asking for advice on immigration law. I tell her I can't give advice, but I can take details and book a meeting. She wants to know about claiming refugee status. I ask her where she is a refuge from. She then tells me that she doesn't want to claim refuge status, her sister does. So I ask her where her sister is from. She tells me from Hong Kong. This was almost a decade ago BTW, so I ask her why she is fleeing Hong Kong. She tells me that her sister isn't fleeing Hong Kong, she is visiting on a 6-month visa. So I ask why she want to help her sister get refuge status. She says she doesn't, she wants her sister to leave. Now, at this point I'm thoroughly confused. So I get her to elaborate. Turns out, her sister is visiting and, to quote her, she is ruining the family. Her sister has threatened to stay on after her visa expires, and this lady want to know whether she can actually do that. The short answer, no legal advice required, is that she can't just stay, she has to go through immigration. So she asks what to do about her. I tell her, if she doesn't leave when her visa expires, call the cops. She says, thanks, and hangs up. I dissolve into fits of giggles. Mom is an attorney and has seen some crazy stuff, but her craziest stories come from when we lived in Tahoe. She worked at one of the only major law firms in the county, so they worked on a variety of cases. I've heard her talk about a lot of cases dealing with naked people, and one time a guy came in with his severed arm as proof he lost his arm in a work accident. One of my close friends is an environmental lawyer, primarily defending individual landowners in corporate cases where discharge or pollution has occurred, or where water rights are in contention. A couple years back, there was a case where a well-known manufacturer of latex paints was found to be poisoning a local wetland, a big freaking deal in my state, with runoff, and the state authority in charge of wetlands preservation took them to court. In a grandstanding effort to demonstrate to the judge that the chemical being discharged near the water could not possibly be toxic to the wildlife, a rep for the company brought a powdered form of the chemical in and mixed it with a glass of water there and then, intending to drink it dramatically in front of the court. The glass, actually plastic, but still, melted right there on the table. The case was settled out of court the same day. Client gets married to a college grad who went to school on a baseball scholarship, but the guy got injured so he couldn't work. So client supports the guy for 8 years while he deals with the pain and gets disability. Client calls guy's dad for an unrelated matter. Dad says guy has never been to college and never played baseball and was never injured. After client confronts guy steals client's inheritance and leaves the state and leaves his 2 kids with client. Don't be like guy. Class action against an automaker who had a latent defect in their minivans that maimed or killed a parent or child every month. They just settle with confidentiality instead of recalling. I'm an international tax lawyer. So much Holocaust money has remained hidden in Swiss and other European and global banks by families who immigrated to America after World War II. They were so scared of disclosing the funds to any government that it remained unreported and untaxed. Hundreds of millions. I help them come back into the system through IRS amnesty programs. It's much, much more common than you'd think. Also, it's often the grandparents or great-grandparents who were survivors of the war who leave families with this burden in their legacy. I was a clerk for a judge who was assigned to criminal cases, and conservatorships and guardianships. Real conservatorships, not Britney Spears bullshit. My first week, this dude comes into court looking like absolute hell, 250+ pounds, bandages all over his body, eye patch, gray hair, completely expressionless. He walks in chained up hands and legs, all this after sitting in solitary for 30 days. Although he must have done something serious. Turns out, it's just a hearing to determine whether the state should be the guy's legal guardian, should he be committed to a mental hospital. He was arrested for burglary after he broke into an apartment building. While waiting for arraignment, he tried to pluck out his own eyeball, failed, thankfully. He was sent to the hospital, then just sent back to jail. The next day he was hearing voices, in his hand, and he tried to peel the skin from the palm of his hand using a broken plastic spoon. He partially succeeded. He continued to try and cut off skin over his arms and legs, sometimes scratching or biting himself, and he unfortunately caused numerous serious injuries to himself. Keep in mind this was all in the county jail and the prison down the street. At arraignment, his public defenders told another judge's story and he was immediately sent for a mental evaluation and his case was handed to my judge. In the meantime, he sat rotting for weeks in prison and hospitals under watch because there were no beds available in the actual mental hospital, yet. He was super nice to my judge and he was obviously just an unlucky soul. Minor criminal history as a juvenile, no history as an adult but couldn't stay employed, no family, and probably drug history, but I didn't get the sense he was ever an addict, like many defendants. He was committed to the state mental hospital, which meant he displaced another patient. He was my age, 31 at the time. It absolutely nuked my view of the justice system. As always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, show your support. Leave your thoughts and opinions down below.